Okay, so welcome to then the third video of the week, and now we're going to be looking at that tricky argument. That one, let me just see if this is recording, by the way, make sure it is. Yep, looks like we are. Okay. We're coming to that tricky argument. McTaggart argues that the A series is contradictory. And I've sort of mentioned this a couple of times already. I've said that it's one of the most difficult arguments to understand in the entirety of philosophy. But it's not like Aristotle's. I also said Aristotle's views on time are hard to understand. It's not quite like that. It's hard in a different kind of a way. It's hard in the sense that when it sort of makes sense, but then it kind of slips through your fingers and sort of disappears into the ether. So it's one of those strange arguments that you can see that there's a point there, you can see that there's something going on. It's not utterly baffling, but every time you try and pin it down and try to really precisely figure out what's going on with the argument, it's at that point, as I said, it slips through the fingers. So it's very interesting. It's been very, very widely discussed. There's lots and lots of material out there on this argument that the A series is contradictory. I'm only going to be mentioning one piece of work on it, which is by a chap called William Altham, or Willie Altham, a philosopher at Cambridge, back in the, I think it was 40s, 50s, 60s. So I'm only really going to be mentioning his review or his response to McTaggart's argument, because I think it's the one that makes the most sense to me. I've had a look through some of the other things, but anyway, we'll see how it goes. As a reminder, then, to keep coming back to this, we've had this argument. So far, we've looked at premise 1 and 2, the idea that if time exists, then changes must occur, where changes is there understood in terms of changes in events rather than objects, and a change in event, McTaggart thinks, only occurs if you've got a change in the A properties of a thing, i.e. or of an event, in terms of its past, present and future. So events move from being future to present, then past, and you get this change. So that's what he thinks you must have in order for genuine change to occur, and therefore for time to exist. But now this is the premise we're going to be looking at. It's actually contradictory for things to have past, present and future, or the A series is contradictory. So okay, to premise 3 we're looking at. We've got the preliminary conclusion. I'll just say this. So from premise 1 and 2 combined, what we've seen so far is if time exists, then moments must be ordered in an A series. Right, that's just putting the two conditionals from premise 1 and 2 together to make a sort of to make another conditional. So okay, here's the sub-argument. So I've split this into like a sub-argument. Here's what McTaggart says. So this seems right. So premise 1, if moments form an A series, every moment must possess one but only one A property. That is, take World War II. So we here in the argument there it mentions moments, but we could talk about events instead. So take World War II. That possesses the property of being past, but if it also possessed the property of being present and the property of being future at the same time, then obviously we wouldn't have an A series. It doesn't really make sense. It must be that things have only one of the A properties. They must be past, they must be present, or they must be future, and they can't be more than one. That's the idea. But then premise 2 says every moment possesses more than one A property, and in fact he thinks that each moment and each event possesses all three. Therefore, they don't form an A series. So he wants to say, look, think about World War II. It was future, we can say, and it was present, and now it is past. And what have I done there? I've used the term was, but I've attributed the property of it's still a way of attributing a property to it. To say it was future and was present is just to say that it has the property of being future and the property of being present, as well as the property of being past. So therefore they have all three properties. Okay, so there's his idea. So just take this in for a minute, just pause and think about it. What has McTaggart said here? He said, look, every single event has got all three A properties. And if we take as an example, take the occurrence of you listening to this lecture right now. That's present for you. It's not present for me, but I can say, well, it's future. So it will. Well, hang on. Yeah, that's not a good example. It's got to be at the same time. Sorry. Let me start again. Take the lecture. Take you sat there listening to this video. You're going to say it's present, but you're going to say, well, it was future and it will be past. And McTaggart thinks that when you say was future, will be past, that's just a way of attributing the A properties of being future and being past to the event in a different way, and therefore each event has got all three A properties, and therefore moments can't form an A series and events can't form an A series. Okay, so that should strike you as a very, very bad argument so far, and that's not the full argument, right? So the obvious response here is to say just that McTaggart isn't taking tenses seriously. It's just not true to say that the thought is to say that when an event was past or will be future or something like that, that's just another way of attributing the properties, the A properties to them. So you can just deny this. You can say, well, look, premise 2 of the sub-argument is false, so that every moment possesses more than one of these. It can never be true for any x. Oh, okay, I'll put this in terms of any x, but I'll give an example of World War II. And let's forget the present for the moment. Let's just think about past and future. It can never be true that World War II is past and is future. So you can really say, no, look, is the way in which you attribute a property to something. But it can be true that World War II is past and was future, and World War II is future and will be past. Those things can be true, and what McTaggart needs in order to show that each of the events has got all three A properties is something like the first thing there, that World War II is past and is future, and he doesn't have that. So there's a kind of response to McTaggart's point here. It's an obvious response. So applying it, you say every moment or every event either was present and is past and will be future, or is past and will be present and will, and you just take tenses seriously, regiment all of this, and it should all be okay, is the thought. So okay, just so we know where we are, McTaggart here is trying to argue that the A series is contradictory, it can't exist. So he starts off with the thought, hang on, well, in order for the A series to make sense, it needs to be that we can attribute only one of the A properties. Do any of these events have? So they must either be past, present, or future, but not more than one of those. But it does seem that we do attribute more than one of those to them, because we say, for example, World War II is past, was future, and was present. The reply, well, yeah, but you've got to take tense seriously. The was and the will be and the tensed expressions don't really attribute properties to things, to these events at all. But McTaggart has got a response to this fairly obvious, it seems like a fairly obvious response to make. You're saying, look, McTaggart, you can't say that when you say that an event was future or was present, that's just another way of attributing a property, one of the A properties, to it. You got to take your tenses seriously. It's only is that does the job. And McTaggart responds to this and he says, well, look, okay, you want to say that this is true, World War II is past and was present and was future, and you telling me I've got to keep my tenses straight and understand that this doesn't mean that it has all three of the A properties, past, present and future, just that it has the one, the past, being past, and that the other ones aren't really attributed to the event at all. He says, well, actually, what does this really mean? World War II is past and was present and was future just means World War II, or the event here, the World War II, is past at the present moment, is present at some past moment, and is future at some past moment. And he says that just assumes that moments can possess one and only one A property. In other words, he wants to say, if you say the event is past at the present moment, is present at some past moment, here it's this bit you're attributing being present to some other moment, and that he thinks is illegitimate. So you've got present moment there, and past moment there. Well, who's to say? He says that this moment has only got one of these A properties. You have to assume that it does in order for this to make sense. Okay. Do you see what's going on? I'm not sure you will, because I'm not sure that I do either. There's something going on here. It is kind of interesting, the idea that, I mean, he seems to think here what we've got is something like a vicious regress. You want to say, look, when you say that World War II was present, that doesn't mean that World War II possesses the property of being present. It just means that it means something different. It means that it did possess it, but doesn't anymore. But then McTaggart says, well, yes, but all that means is that World War II is present at some past moment. And there, what you've done is you've used the term past moment, and you're assuming there that moment, the past moment, only has the A property of being past. So you're assuming what you want to prove. So we need to say, okay, how do we know that? And yeah, something going on. So okay, I mean, I'm just going to turn to Willie Altham now. I mean, I don't know what else to say, but we can talk about the argument in the seminar. Have a look at the McTaggart paper. I'm going to post it, so see what you make of it. But it's hard. It's hard work, this argument. So okay, I'm just going to look at a response to it by Willie Altham. So McTaggart, and this is one of his examples, he says the Battle of Hastings is tenselessly, so important when we move to this idea that's saying that it is past at the present moment. The is here has to be understood tenselessly. So the is isn't like a present tense version, it's a kind of a tenseless version, because you're saying it is present at some past moment. Okay, so it's tenseless. So McTaggart asserts the Battle of Hastings is past, and the Battle of Hastings is present, and the Battle of Hastings is future, right? So he says it is past at some past. It is past at the present moment. The Battle of Hastings is present at some past moment, and it is future at some past moment, right? But the is there is supposed to be attributing those properties to the event tenselessly. But Altham turns around and he says, well, hang on a minute, we've got no reason to think that this is true. So think about when we say the Battle of Hastings is past. He says, well, what does that mean? You say it is past, is present, and is future. Well, normally if we say that something is past, we mean that it happened or that it occurred. You know, World War II is past means that World War II happened. Past tense. So if it is past and is present and is future, then Altham says, well, we ought to think that what this means is the Battle of Hastings happened, is happening, and will happen. And that's obviously false, isn't it? Says Altham. So, in other words, he wants to pick up on the grammatical use of the tenses too, or when we use these A properties. To say that event is past, according to Altham, is just to say that it happened. Those are equivalent, exactly the same. But McTaggart also says this: the Battle of Hastings was future, and the Battle of Hastings was present, and the Battle of Hastings is past. So he allows that, right? And he says that this is equivalent to the Battle of Hastings is future at some past moment, and the Battle of Hastings is present at some, you can work that through, is present at some past moment, the Battle of Hastings is past at the present moment. So yeah, we saw with the World War II example, this way of translating into this way of talking. But Altham says, well, the Battle of Hastings, sorry about the gap, I don't know why I've got a gap in there. The Battle of Hastings was future, the Battle of Hastings was present, the Battle of Hastings is past, is in fact not equivalent to what McTaggart says it's equivalent to, but equivalent to, it was the case that the Battle of Hastings was going to happen, and it was the case that the Battle of Hastings was happening, and it is the case that the Battle of Hastings has happened. And once we translate it in that way, thinks Altham, all of the difficulties seem to disappear that we had. And look, I'm perfectly aware that this isn't really doing much justice to this. I'm sure it's quite difficult to listen to this and try and work out what's going on. Yeah, it is quite difficult to work out what's going on. So, the rest of the McTaggart stuff I think is relatively clear. We can make sense of it okay. But this argument, I kind of pointed out right from the beginning this was going to be tough, and it is tough. So, there we are. I'm not going to say anything more about it. I'll be interested to see what you make of this argument. See whether you can have a look at the McTaggart, as I've said, the 1908 paper, and read through it. And I'd love to hear what you think about it. I find this perplexing. And anyway, so that's it. That's all I'm going to say about this premise book. We can talk more about it in the seminar.